Hello, everybody. Welcome to Somali Dispatch. In the last 3 years, Somalia's federal government, alongside the international community and specifically the World Bank and IMF, have been trying to figure out a way to mitigate the country's debt issues as it relates to opening up opportunities for Somalia and to access financing from the World Bank and also to attract investment that will support the country's stability and development. However, there has not been a clear explanation how this is going to be done moving forward and what implications it would have for Somalis all over, especially in the federal member states and including Somaliland. For further clarifications, we contacted Dr. Hussein Warsame, an accounting professor at Haskayne School of Business in Calgary. Welcome to Somali Dispatch, Professor.
Oh, thank you.
Let me begin by asking you if you can give us a brief overview of the Somali federal government's efforts towards the country's debt relief.
Well, the debt relief, first of all, the debt that we owe is owed to external sources, not to internal sources. That means it's not domestic. Unlike Canada and United States, where most of their debts usually are domestic, ours it was completely external, about $5.2 billion. So what the federal government did is this. It started with the former government of Somalia, that was the government by Hassan Sheikh, in 2013, when we were allowed to come back to the international community again. We accepted that we owe that money, and then in 2016 they started asking for forgiveness, or what we call in general what they call relief. But it is this government, the government of Formaggio, that has done probably the hardest work. They were given some kind of conditions, about 18 conditions, but over 3 years, actually almost 4 years, they were called SMPs, which means basically staff monitoring programs. And in each case, when one is fulfilled, then they were given another one. So 4 of them has lapsed. After the 4th one has lapsed, then the government of Somalia was allowed to have some relief, which amounts to about 1.5 billion. So now, as of this day today, what we owe the international community is $3.7 billion. And why were they given that? Because the international community thinks that the Somali government has done enough to stabilize the economy to some extent, at least have policies, good policies, of raising funds by using taxes, and also spending that money on the right places, like, for example, salaries, and through the right channels, through the bank. So the money comes to the bank, central bank, and then it goes out of the bank to other accounts. So that is why the international community thought that we were doing well with the little thing that we had, and then we should be rewarded.
Before we go any further, Professor Hussein, do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I do. I was, in fact, almost mostly part of it. And so I do know that at least the finance department, the finance ministry, what we call, is doing excellent job. The bank was reinstituted. In fact, I do have some access to their accounts, since I am also a board member there now. And they have done quite a bit, especially in supervising the other banks, which are the private banks, and also supervising the MTBs, or what we call the money transfer businesses. So they have done a very good job in that manner. In terms of corruption, we don't know whether that is still there and whether that has been completely tackled. They have formed a commission, and that commission probably will be, they just passed the law, but they haven't yet appointed people to their. Yeah.
We will get to that aspect of what's going to be happening. As a board member, perhaps you'll be the appropriate person to speak to about this. Having said that, what has been achieved and what's been worked on? Can you tell us what it is exactly? Because no one seems to know, as it's been referred to as a debt relief, a bridged relief, debt consolidation. What sort of an issue, how would you characterize what's been achieved?
What was happening is this. So first of all, yes, as of the 25th of March, we owe with the world $5.2 billion. But on that date, three things actually happened. What we call the IMF, or International Monetary Fund, has in fact relieved us of about $340, which was arrears and interest. Basically something that we were supposed to pay, not all the money that was due, but something that we were supposed to pay that we didn't pay. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Italian government that in fact gave us what we call bridge loans. Bridge loans basically means when you get that loan, it is a short loan, you get it when you expect that you will get that fund from somewhere else, and then you will pay it back very quickly in a short time. So what happened was that money was given, Italy gave it to the bank, then the IMF, then the IMF has cleared that one, and then the IMF has given us what we call front-loaded access, which means more like some kind of a grant. And that didn't come to the Somali government. It was right away transferred to the Italian government. So Italy doesn't owe us anymore, and the IMF doesn't owe it. The idea was even more interesting, what we call the World Bank, especially it is International Development Association. Norway did the same. On March 5, they gave that money. It was about $366 million. They gave that money to the bank, and then the money, once it accepted, it cleared our loans, and then right away it gave us some grants from what they call development policy grant from that fund, and that was then used to pay the Norwegians. And the same thing was done by the UK for the African development. But the whole point is these organizations wanted to forgive the loan, but they wanted a mechanism. They cannot just forgive it. They don't have that power. So a government, some other government should give the money, and then they will give Somalia some kind of a grant, and then that grant will be used to pay the loan. So that's how it was done. That was what the bridge is. Some people think that it is not legit. Some people think it is Bonzi kind of a scheme. It is not. It is legit.
And others, with all due respect, think that Somalia borrowed more to pay its debt. So to get further into the weeds with this, do you as a board member now think, or do you foresee that, given Somalia's current political situation, can you foresee this being implemented in a positive manner?
Of course. First of all, I'm a board member of the bank. It is the bank that I'm a board member. So the government policy is different from the bank policy. Bank is just a part of that, which is the bank, and this is not from the bank itself. But I am confident that if the Somali government, and here there is still a lot of tests going on. So far, what was achieved in Ladmi Abdul Ghadir is only $1.55 billion were given as a relief. So we still owe $3.7 billion. That will be cleared up to $550 million. Only $550 million will remain in 3 years. But in those 3 years, the government of Somalia is supposed to do a few things. Yes, the National Central Bank of Somalia should integrate this work, and it has to do quite a few more things. Yes, the Corruption Commission has to be set up, and it has to be functional. Yes, the government has already come up with something called what we call a policy or a strategy to reduce poverty. That has to be implemented. That means money has to be spent on education, on health, and on job creation. For that to happen, the IMF and the World Bank will now give us some grants. For example, the IMF will give us about $395 million in 3 years to help with those projects. The World Bank, especially through this IDA organization, will try to help with those people who lost everything, their livelihood, through the flooding, through the droughts, and the locust invasion, those kind of things. So that will also get some help from them. And that will be, but how this is going to be done is, it is projects. You have to apply for the project. And then the World Bank and the IMF will finance that. Then you will be again evaluated. And if you have done all those things and you haven't borrowed any more money, and remember, you should not borrow any more money until that happens, then you will be given debt relief, and only 550 million, which will be, of course, not that heavy, will be left. The point is, the World Bank and the IMF and international community agreed in 1996 and in 2005 that no poor country should ever shoulder debt that is more than 30% of its GDP. And ours was almost 110%. So now we are reducing to 10% by the time this HIPC program is over.
Which is about 3 years, as you indicated, correct?
Which is about within 3 years, exactly.
So that takes out the implication that the Somali government, be it the current or the forthcoming one, there's no more borrowing going on until those steps are implemented. So now, let's talk about another aspect of this process, which is the member states and Somaliland. Let's start with Somaliland. How involved was Somaliland? Because we just heard the main political parties and the president of Somaliland condemning the process that the World Bank and IMF and all the debt relievers went through. What was your assessment of what they said, and your based on your knowledge of the steps that took place?
First of all, they were not involved directly. Indirectly, maybe, because the world still sees Somalia as one country, not as two countries. So therefore, not directly. However, of course, you would expect Somaliland to say that. They have to say that. They are seeking a sovereignty. They are seeking independence. Therefore, they should say that they are not part of it, and the World Bank and the IMF should treat them like separate countries. That's expected. Okay. But also, this is not going to disadvantage them. That is important. It is not going to disadvantage. If money comes and projects are allowed, then those projects will also be open to the provinces. They will be open to the federal states and to Somaliland as well. So Somaliland could apply for those programs, and they could be given that money. Right now, as you know, there is some kind of an understanding between the governments of Somalia, the Somaliland government, and the national community that a portion of whatever help that comes in the name of the Somali government should be given to Somaliland and to other places. So there is already that mechanism. So there is nothing to worry about, but still, of course, it is their place to say that we are not part of it, and we should be treated differently.
But just to go back a little bit into the debt issue, just for clarification purposes, the debt we just discussed and you eloquently detailed, is that the debt that were incurred by Somalia after Hassan Sheikh's presidency, or is this the overall debt Somalia incurred over the years since independence?
I am glad that you asked that, because that is a very good question. No, this money was incurred before, up to 1980 and before. So basically, nothing was given to the Somali government after that one, before the Somali people didn't trust them. So, and after 1991, no debt was taken in the name of Somalia, of course. So this is basically most of the money of the 5.2 billion, most of it, that means more than 50%, is in fact arrears and what we call fines. So in reality, the total debt that we owe was not more than 2 billion. The rest is basically interest, but it is just as legal as any other body.
Thank you very much for your explanation and in-depth knowledge of this subject. That was Professor Hussein Warsame. He was talking to me on the phone, calling from Calgary. Thank you once again, Professor.
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. You are very welcome. Bye-bye.